My name is Eric Kakou. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Entrepreneurial Solutions Partners. It's a privilege for me to be with you today to moderate a session about the cow in the car. Who has any idea what we plan to talk about today? Who knows for sure? If you know, raise your hand. Okay, a couple of people. So the other one, you came because you are curious. Okay, let me have a sense for who's who in the room. If you are from the private sector, raise your hand. If you're an entrepreneur, raise your hand. Okay, that's very, very good. We have a few entrepreneurs, myself included. If you are from government, raise your hand. We have a few as well. If you work with a development partner organization, could be linked to government development partner, please raise your hand as well. Very good. If you are academia, civic society, press, raise your hand. We'll have a few. Okay. So what we are going to talk about today is one of the most important topics facing any growing economy in the world, especially in Africa, that is serious about creating prosperity. What we want to talk about is to think critically about how we can innovate around agriculture. How can we do agriculture differently? How can we do agriculture in a way where we move beyond subsistence to a place where it really becomes a mechanism? As one of the organizations on the panel says, it becomes some sort of a pathway to prosperity. USADF, I think that's one of your key ideas. How do we really use agriculture to create prosperity? For those of you who know Rwanda, you will know that cows have a very important meaning for the country. I mean, it's really a symbol of social cohesion. It's really a source of wealth. It's a source of prestige. It's also a mechanism to change people's lives. The country actually innovated about 10 years ago around a homegrown solution, which is called the Giringa program. It actually means everyone gets a cow. And the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning was telling us earlier today that the program has managed to actually give over 300,000 cows, when in fact the target was 150,000, right? So it's really a program that has really helped this bottom 16% of Rwandans who need help to really have access to some of the things that they need. And we are here today to think about how we come up with a Giringa 2.0. How do we really embed technology, innovation, and knowledge in the way we do agriculture? So I'm going to start with a little story. When I started my career a little over 20 years ago, so it doesn't look like it, but I have some white hair, I was working for a company where the cow was very sacred because the company actually went to Colombia in the 90s to work with the government of Colombia on how to add value to the leather. So at the time, the country had started exporting some leather and they were sending the leathers to New York. So everybody was excited and the government was like, oh my God, we have New York buying Colombian leathers. It means we are doing well. And then after a while, the customers there started complaining. They felt like, for some reason, the leather that was coming from Colombia wasn't good. So because we got the assignments, some of the members of the team actually went to New York to ask the buyers what was really happening. We're like, look, you know, you used to buy leathers from Colombia, you are not doing it anymore. What's going on? They said, well, it's not our fault. It's not our fault. The leather that we actually get from the manufacturers is not very good. So we went to the manufacturers. They said, well, it's not our fault because the leather that we actually get from the tanneries is not very good. So we went to the tanneries convinced that it was the fault of the tanneries. So we go to the tanneries, we tell them, listen, we think you have a problem. You don't seem to be sort of getting it. What are you doing to Colombian leather? They said, no, 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 it's not our fault. By the time we get the leather to the tanneries, it's already too late. The leather is already spoiled. So you know what we did? We then went to the tanneries who told us, listen, it's actually the farmers because they give us cows that already have issues with the leathers. Then we went to the farmers, convinced that at long last we were holding the culprit. We were like, you know what? it can only be you because you are the only people left in this chain. Do you know what the farmers told us? Anybody has an idea? They said it's not our fault. We said, how? They said, no, you know, it's actually the cows. So we told that story blaming the cow, because we looked at the whole chain in terms of how do we add value to cow products. And people were trying to convince us that the reason why Colombian leather wasn't doing very well was because they had cows that would go and wrap themselves against barbed wires when they were getting beaten up by ticks. The reason why I'm telling you this story is that you are in this room because you are a stakeholder in development. If you are an entrepreneur, you contribute to development. If you are a government, you contribute to development. If you are civil society, anyone you are, if you are a human being, a citizen, you have a role to play in development. I'm hoping that we can have a conversation that's very concrete, which really allows us to come out of here with innovative ideas in terms of what we can do to change agriculture. We will start with the metaphor of the cow in the car, but whatever ideas we come up with could be applied to other products that we have that we may not be able to think about that well. But before actually opening it to asking the Minister of Finance to come and give us a keynote, I'm actually going to give you a few statistics, because I believe that often numbers are very good in helping us understand where we are. So in 2017, the global meat market was about $750 billion, right? $750 billion, that's the global meat market. If you take the leather market in comparison to the global meat market, it's about $220 billion, right? Now, this is a little bit more than a third of the global meat market. Now, I'm going to give you some sort of a growth rate so that you have an idea. Meat market is growing at 7% per year. This is a very, very high growth rate, right? If you look at some of the economies that are growing the fastest in the world, Rwanda, China, etc., they grow basically around 7%. So that's a big deal. If you look at the leather sector, it's growing at 4.5% per year, right? Now, where does this leather come from? Some of it comes from cows. That's the good news, right? 65%, 10% from pig. Now, to put those statistics in context, who here is in technology? Technology? That's very good. So you would appreciate this. Microsoft, Google, the market cap is $730 billion about. So this is less than the meat market, right? So the meat market is bigger than Microsoft and Google. But the leather market, which is 1/3 of the meat market, is actually 30% of Microsoft and Google. If you think about it like a business, it's a huge opportunity, right? In most of our countries, we really deal with the meat. We forget the value that's there. You know, this is 30% of Google, 30% of Microsoft. And also to give you another sense, if you take the Nigerian economy, the whole of it, everything, it's 400 billion. So leather industry, 50% of Nigeria. This is a big opportunity. What we want to talk about today is how do we, as African nations, take advantage of it? How do we really move forward? So it gives me great pleasure to call Dr. Uzuel Ngajimana, who is actually the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning for the Republic of Rwanda, and who is our host, to deliver the keynote address. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Eric Kaku, our moderator. Distinguished guests, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, allow me once again to warmly welcome you to Rwanda, and I hope you are enjoying our hospitality and maximizing the opportunities for business and leisure while contributing to the noble cause of digital transformation for Africa. It is my great pleasure and honor to share some thoughts with you on the subject of linking digital transformation to agriculture and industrialization. As you know, over 70% of Africans live in rural areas and depend on agriculture for their livelihood. Agriculture is also said to account for approximately 24% of African countries' GDP. And it is also said to be 11 times more effective in reducing poverty than GDP growth in other sectors, such as manufacturing and services, according to the World Economic Forum. In Rwanda, agriculture is still the main form of livelihood for close to 68% of the country's population, and the sector contributes approximately 30% of the country's GDP. Studies have shown over the last 15 years, agriculture has contributed about 35% towards poverty reduction, while commercialization of agriculture has made up a further 10%. Furthermore, the trajectories of developed and newly industrialized countries, which started with a significant share of agriculture sector, have proven that transforming agriculture is a stepping stone towards sustained economic growth. Even though structural transformation is happening on the continent, with increased proportions of the labor force moving from agriculture to industry and services, the pressure is still on to ensure that productivity in the sector of agriculture is increased to enhance returns to investment. Africa's food import bill stands at about $25 billion, while all the African food market is expected to grow to $1 trillion by the year 2030, whereas the demand for food on the continent will double by 2050. This shows that we have a lot of work to do to increase productivity, to ensure sustainable growth. However, it also points to a huge opportunity for the continent to modernize Africa's agriculture and increase productivity and the linkages to industry and to markets. The linkages between agriculture and industry in Rwanda are already quite strong. Agro-processing is now Rwanda's largest manufacturing subsector, with production output representing 58% of total manufacturing and 19% of total industrial output. The agribusiness sector continues to play an important role in transforming agriculture and in connecting farmers to markets and developing strong linkages along domestic value chains. However, there is still room for improvement in order to cement the transformation of agriculture through industrialization. With new technologies, the agriculture sector can become a driving force for Africa's economic growth by becoming more efficient, competitive, market-driven, and climate resilient. The sector has potential to create more sustainable and productive jobs for its population while reducing food shortages, malnutrition, and poverty across the continent. In Rwanda, we have a vision of transforming the agriculture sector into productive and high-value market-oriented sector with strong forward linkages. This is clearly outlined in our Vision 2020, the blueprint of Rwanda Vision 2050, the National Strategy for transformation, and the strategic plan for agriculture transformation. It was also included in the Smart Rwanda Master Plan, as we have started already the implementation. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to offer some insights into areas we are exploring to achieve transformation of agriculture sector and strengthening linkages to industry in Rwanda. One of our key focuses is the youth. We have deliberately initiated programs to attract youth in agriculture and agribusiness, as it is the only way to go given our demographic structure. The youth is looking at agriculture with a fresh perspective. They are hungry to get involved. They are motivated to create value, employment, and they are in it for business, not for subsistence. We are already engaging youth in skills development programs, including professional farm management, irrigation scheme operation, and agribusiness, among others. We are working with them to have peer learning groups to share best practices. The interest of youth is evident in the increased adoption of new high-value crops, such as in horticulture. They are also much involved in schemes such as irrigation and mechanization. The youth and technology are almost inseparable. We are targeting to have 100% digital literacy among the youth by 2024, sorry. And the general literacy rate is targeting 60% of the total population by 2024. That is the target for the 7-year government program that we started last year. The advancement of technology today has opened up and created more opportunities across all sectors, including agriculture. In Rwanda, with mobile penetration of nearly 80%, mobile technologies have given rise to innovative market information systems, such as Isoko, that is run by the Ministry of Agriculture, where farmers can get updated information on market prices in different markets. Increased access to finance with 89% financial inclusion has also provided the backbone to mobile-based payments and money transfers. We are seeing more and more innovations and IT solutions being developed and customized through the private sector towards agricultural development, such as in irrigation systems. The rollout of crop and animal insurance products and the registration of information on farmers will help produce the perceived risk in agriculture and attract more financing to the agriculture sector. This will all be integrated in a smart agriculture information system, which will offer a common warehouse of data on agriculture sector that will help reduce market failures emanating from lack of data and reduce vulnerability to climate change and enhance operation in agriculture seasons. For example, farmers will be able to get live updates on planting seasons, advice on input usage, and a package of integrated services using their mobile phones. I'm sure there are many more opportunities out there, of which I'm looking forward to hearing from our distinguished panelists. My hope is that we can successfully deliberate on how we can promote agriculture as a new frontier for breakthrough in industry that creates new streams of income and revenue for the future, contribute to GDP growth, improves the export base, promotes food security, and leads to massive reduction of poverty. As I conclude, I would like to thank our dear moderator, Erika Koo, the panelists and the participants for this interesting session. Let me hope that out of these discussions, we'll be able to come up with more exciting and scalable solutions to enable the continent to transform agriculture and build strong bridges to industries. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I would like now to draw your attention to the picture that's showing. I don't know if everybody can see the picture. Can everybody see it? Yeah? Okay. That picture actually gives you in one place all the different products that you could consider just from cattle. So beyond leather, because earlier I was talking a lot about leather in terms of the role it plays and the size and everything. If you look at the list here, you could literally do so much with cattle, it's actually mind-blowing. So I'm going to ask our panelists, first of all, introduce them briefly. First of all, we have Mr. C.D. Glynn, who is the president and CEO of the U.S. Africa Development Foundation. It is a U.S. government development institution that has a portfolio of about $60 million invested in 20 countries across the continent. They have a very unique model, which I hope CD will share some insights on as we lead the discussion. Then we have Mr. Rafik El Alami, who is the Chief Investment Officer of the University Mohammed VI Polytechnic in Morocco. He's also representative of the sponsors of this session. So we are here thanks to Rafik and the organizations that he sort of represents here. We have Ms. Gillian Pace, who's an associate partner at McKinsey. She's an expert in agriculture. And last but not least, we have Ms. Louise Kayonga, who is at the Rwanda Development Board. And I think she's a lawyer by training, but she's also an expert on agriculture and cows. So what we are hoping to do this morning really is to have a discussion with you, is to have an exchange. So we are going to have a few thoughts from the panel, but very quickly, we are hoping to turn it over to the group so that we can really hear from you as well. And I would like to maybe make a couple of key points as we go. One of the specific outcomes that we have from this session, we are hoping that many of you are going to participate in a challenge that is going to be launched in June 2018 by NIRDA. NIRDA is the National Institute for Research and Development of Rwanda. It is an institution that has been created with the purpose of ensuring that the country is really able to innovate across all the sectors where it works. And they're going to launch this challenge with OCP, with the UM6P, University Mohammed VI Polytechnic, and other partners. So we hope that all of you will participate, and we'll give you a chance towards the end of the panel to hear you and see who in this room may have a chance to actually win this challenge. So let me start by building on what the minister said. I think in what the minister said, there were a few ideas which to me were very important. He talked about how a country can really move from subsistence agriculture to using agriculture as a source of prosperity. For that to happen, he gave examples which spoke to the mindset that stakeholders have to have. So how do we do things differently? How do we sort of innovate? Second, he gave us specific solutions which had been put in place or which were being considered to move things forward, whether those solutions were in the IT space or were homegrown. And finally, he gave us also some innovations to move things forward. So what I'm hoping we will hear from the panel today are elements which build on those different building blocks. And I'm going to start with Louise. Louise, often when we think of a cow, when we think of agriculture in general, we think of the main thing. So in the cow, for example, it would be the meat. So we think I'm raising the cow because I want milk, because I want meat. And we treat everything else that comes with the cow as waste. How do we make sure that we are able to really transform that waste and turn it into value?
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think you set the stage for us quite well. And I think also from the discussions that we've had throughout, I think it's coming out very clearly that if we don't harness, these technologies, innovations across our most productive sectors, then, Africa is not going to become globally competitive. And, we cannot talk about productive sectors without talking about agriculture. And I think something that's also coming out very clearly for us, as the government, and particularly institutions such as NIRDA and the Rwanda Development Board, is that while, thinking and listening to the minister, all these different interventions that have been made in the agricultural space, one of the things that I think we've been really missing is looking at how the entire chain works and making sure that, we are not intervening at just, specific points along the chain and missing out other parts. And I think one of the parts along the value chain that we rarely talk about, and as you said, Eric, is, the waste that comes from either, livestock or agriculture. We've had several interventions around inputs, how do we improve seed variety, and I think we'll be discussing a lot of that a bit later. But to answer your question specifically, Eric, I think the idea that we have, which NIRDA and its partners, UM6P, MIT, and OSEPE, have come up, which is quite interesting, very innovative, is saying, looking at the cow, and I think all of us Rwandans know how significant the cow is to our culture. Looking at the Girinka program, which, as the minister said, and I think Eric touched on it as well, has been one of our most successful poverty eradication programs. We realized that there is such immense potential within the cow to spur a lot of other industries, a lot of other, there's a lot of byproducts from that one picture that you saw, from which we could use these products to then, as key inputs in other industries. And I know Rafik will be speaking about that a bit later. But in terms of waste specifically, what we realized is that once the cow has been maximized, for its beef and milk potential, the methods and the equipment that we are using, for instance, in our slaughterhouses, in the abattoirs, does not really allow for any residual use of whatever waste is left to get these byproducts that can be used in other industries. And so this concept that NIRDA and its partners have developed looks at how do we take things like, the hide and skin, and use that in car manufacture, car assembly. You can use hide and skins for the leather seats in cars. The cow horn, the hooves, the bones, that can be used as the decorative elements in the front dashboard of the car. I think you've seen in most cars, you have a little bit of wood, decorative elements. We could use cow horn, and I think it would actually look a lot more, it would actually come out more as a luxury product than what we currently have. The fat that comes from the car, that is something that can also be used, as lubricant in car engines. And that's just really looking, at what is unique to our context, what is our everyday resource in terms of agriculture, in terms of livestock, and how do we enhance value from that. And that's really the thinking that I think we need to adapt. If you look at other countries and more developed economies, there really isn't anything that is left or that is considered as waste. And so, we need to start looking at the entire chain and seeing how we enhance value, how we get the most out of it. And I think that really is the idea behind, turning waste to value. We've seen countries that are, using agricultural waste for biofuels, turning it into electricity, energy, and so many other, industries, fertilizer, manufacture, etc. And so Rwanda is looking at this as a starting point, sort of as a launch pad that we can then, scale across different agricultural products and different resources that we have. And this is where I think NIRDA and its partners will play a very key role, which is in, looking constantly, having that foresight to see what are the technologies that are out there or that we should be thinking of in the next 10 to 20 years that can enhance these priority value chains. And I know that, we have plans of, for instance, coming up with very high-tech, very modern labs, for instance, in STEM and in life sciences, where we're getting these young people that I think you can see in the room who are probably, agro-entrepreneurs, agro-innovators, get them excited, get them involved, incubate them, the skills and the talent that they have, and make sure that, we're using that, the talent that you have as response to some of these issues. And that's something that RDB is also extremely keen on. We're doing some work with a global consulting firm, BCG, and from that, we're realizing that, and as you spoke about the Colombia, idea, it really did come to mind that everyone is blaming the next part of the chain simply because we're not looking at it as a continuum and seeing how all these different things feed into each other. And so what we've realized that for us, at RDB is that the best response to those kind of issues is going to be the private sector. How do we bring the private sector with, the experience and the expertise that they have in technology, in innovation, and responding to those different parts of the chain?
Thank you, Louise. Thank you for a very sort of insightful answer. I think you touched on points that are very, very important. You mentioned the idea that we need some sort of collaboration. So we need to make sure that the entire chain works. I think that's important. You brought in the role of the private sector, both in a way in which we can incubate entrepreneurs to do things differently, but also in the way in which we can also leverage the experience and expertise of the private sector. And you also brought the sort of different kind of thinking that's required in order for things to move. Gillian, let me now turn to you. So everybody would agree, you look at a cow, there is meat in there is milk in there is manure, but how do we do meat 2.0? How do we do milk 2.0? How do we do manure 2.0? How do we really embed knowledge and technology in all these different products?
Thanks, Eric, and a pleasure to be here with all of you. I think I'll look at this question from the sense of the context of industrialization of agriculture and the role that technology plays. We're talking about cows, but of course, this applies to crops and poultry and all other forms of agriculture that we do. And a lot of what we're talking about, as Louise mentioned, is happening already, right? I think there's a great video you can watch on a TED Talk which talks about the 185 different products that are currently made from a pig in the European Union. So that image that we were showing is not a pie-in-the-sky dream. It's actually happening in other markets. And the question becomes, what's the role of technology now in actually helping accelerate similar transformations in Africa? And I'll tell you an interesting fact. In general, agriculture is an underinvested space when it comes to innovation. I think we did some math, and in the past 10 years, $14 billion of capital has gone into 1,000 startups in agriculture. Sounds big, but in the same time in healthcare, $145 billion of investment went into 18,000 startups. So this is a place that's ripe for innovation, and so for all of you out here who are entrepreneurs, and what I'd like to do is share some of what those innovations are, right, and what you can think about. And we did some work with the World Economic Forum on what are the blockbuster technologies in agriculture that we expect to happen and expect to also happen in the emerging market. And we're talking about things like spectroscopy as a way to assess the freshness of food and the freshness of meat over the course of the value chain. Like, think about how much is actually lost in an agricultural value chain. It's about 25%. So can you actually, I mean, we're talking about beef 2.0. Can you actually not avoid the loss and improve the quality of the beef by using remote sensing and spectroscopy technologies? Things like actually the ability to do remote sensing on what's happening in the value chain. A lot of when we talk about cows, for example, the temperature in which they're raised in a barn, the type of food that they eat has a huge impact in the amount of milk they're producing and the quality of the beef. And you look at what's happening in the United States, where an average cow barn has, you know, tons of heat sensors in it, and a farmer has an application and is able to control the heat sensing going on in that barn, right? Is that a similar technology that you can apply in a sort of more simplified fashion on the type of mobile phone that you could have here in Africa? We're talking about the use of gene editing, specifically in terms of crops. I think a lot of you probably have heard of CRISPR, which is the ability to actually embed new traits directly into the gene of crops. And is there a role looking at the genetic mapping of livestock as well in Africa as a way to stimulate breeding? And so these are some of those big technologies that are coming, and I think we had outlined 12. And as the minister mentioned, there is, of course, the use of mobile technology as a form of getting information out there to farmers, as a form of getting financial access out to farmers. Some of you may be familiar with this app in Kenya called iCow, which is actually about giving farmers a tool to track the breeding cycle of their cows and actually improve the breeding cycle of their cows and therefore increase dairy production. And then we talk about even the use of advanced analytics as a form of sort of industrializing agriculture, and a way in particular to provide index-based crop and livestock insurance. And we already have pilots of this happening in various places in Africa. So can you use satellite data or the data from people's farms to actually say how much vegetation is on the ground, and therefore what do we expect in terms of livestock production and crop production, and index insurance against that, and therefore improve the resiliency of populations. So what I've given you is a ton of different ideas and technologies that are out there, and I'd love to hear in the discussion ideas that you have on how to actually apply this, particularly in the context of the cow and the car, but also Rwandan agriculture in general. And I think there's as I mentioned, I think this is an underinvested and under-trialed space, and there's a significant role from the government, as Nirda is actually suggesting, but also from you as the private sector, to think about sort of sustainable and monetizable use cases that you can actually scale. And I'd love to actually have a discussion about that with all of you.
Gillian, thank you so much. You know, I really love the fact that you didn't really talk about things that were not happening. You gave us examples which were concrete of technologies that were already being rolled out in other parts of the world, often even in Africa. But you also noted the fact that in terms of an area of focus and investment, there was a lot more that could actually be done. Okay, I think this is very, 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 very helpful. So you're also saying that we should really bring elements that are working in other space into agriculture as well. Absolutely. That's very good. Rafik, we have spoken a lot about cars, right? We started with the cow in the car, and we've talked about leather seats and all of that. What can we do as it relates to a cow beyond a car? So how do we really broaden our thinking in terms of the opportunities that are there? And for you as a technologist, how do we bring technology in making sure that we can harvest those opportunities?
All right. Thank you, Eric. I'm really glad to be among you today. So I will just build on what Luis and Gillian mentioned. I think they covered some of the potential low-hanging fruits that today we can do to improve the process by looking at the value chain completely and not treating components of that value chain as waste, but then seeing how we can actually do the transformation. There are a lot of improvements that potentially we can do in the process using technology, IoT, and making sure that actually the production, the farming is more efficient, and in a way that actually we can get more out of the current processes that we have. What I would like to take like your question to is basically say, how do we go beyond that? Because actually, like hearing the president yesterday speaking in the inauguration address, he mentioned that people of Rwanda do only settle for big things. And I think the question here is, what can we do beyond that? Like, what are the further improvements that we can do to the process? What are the other products that we can actually create? And those are the things that are not going to come very easy, but actually that will potentially create the most value. Because now we're creating a differentiation, because the low-hanging fruits, there are many other people that are doing it. But then we can start looking beyond that and see how we can add more value to that value chain. And the concept note, and as you've seen earlier, there is probably like 3,000 type of products that we can create out of the cow that can be where the cow is a raw material for those kind of industries. So for example, if we take the insulin, which is one of the products that was there, so this is something that actually it's gonna take a lot of research and development basically to make sure that we can turn that into a real product, because producing insulin means that potentially we have very efficient processes, technology processes, that there is a lot of testing and development that's done to make sure that actually the insulin is meeting the healthcare qualities that can be administered to a human body. So those are the things where actually there are a lot of opportunities for startups, for private sector, for academia to do research and turn that research and development into new product, new patents, things that potentially can be licensed to other parts of the country or outside the Rwanda to other countries. So this is something where we can create this kind of new ecosystem between the private sector, the university, the government, and basically develop something new beyond the obvious things that we can come create through the process. The second thing, and which is pretty interesting, is that every time you go into a new field of industry, when you want to make those efficiency creation, like creating more efficient processes, there is the human factor in there. And that human factor means that we need to think beyond the technology and say, look, actually the first thing is we need to get those people trained. We need to build the capacity in a way that we can have those people do their job at the best way they can, so that actually we don't create at the end leather that's not meeting the qualities of the customer. So in all that, there is a lot of training and that needs to happen. And I think this is another area for innovation, because actually like creating new innovative training systems for workers, for the farmers, the workers at the slaughterhouse, the workers in the plants, like there is a lot of areas of innovation that can be done here. And just to make it a little bit more concrete, we had similar issues like we training farmers, because we wanted basically farmers to, in Morocco, in other African countries, to be able to use like newer technologies to basically improve the yield of their crops and their farms. And what we've done, the idea was what we created, the OCP Foundation created, was called the Farmer Caravan. And so this is basically, think about it as a huge truck that's equipped with all lab soil fertility testing, where actually the farmer comes like in the morning with samples from like the farm, and then we do the testing, we characterize basically the soil type, we tell them the best like crops that will match their soil, we'll tell them basically what kind of nutrients they need to add, and at the end of the day, they leave with the knowledge of how to apply the fertilizer, they live with the fertilizer, and actually we're sure that transfer of the knowledge, the empowerment, the capacity building is happening. And that caravan actually it stopped almost in every region in Morocco, and there are many other African countries where we did something similar. And I'm pretty much sure this is one case. There are other opportunities, like building those trucks, building similar ideas, similar initiatives. There's a lot of material for startups and innovation around that. And then last but not least is basically the part where we're fully embracing technology. And here it's not just like looking at the different technology is one thing. Like we could look at this whole process from the time we're growing the crops to feed the cows, taking care of the cows, basically the slaughtering house, the plants. Like there is tons of data that we can create in this process. And we can mine it, and we can turn it into real things. Like we can take that data, like there is today data science things that, algorithms that we can apply to mine actually knowledge out of that data, so that the process is better, so that the decisions that we're making are better, and that's actually we're increasing the whole thing. Like there are, like if I take just like one thing, Gillian mentioned, for example, the genes, and Eric mentioned basically the problem with the cows. Well, can we do the right selection? Like if we're testing the genes of the cows, and can we do like a kind of selection, mine that data, find the things that actually, what are the cows with the genes that will produce the best leather, the best milk, the best or tender meat or more meat, or like depending on whatever we want to do, like there is a lot of opportunities for us basically to go and mine that data. There are IoT, and again, like for the IoT, we mentioned tracking the cows. Today, we can also use IoT in the farm to make sure that actually we're tracking the fertilizer used, the moisture of the soil and everything, and making sure that actually we're doing growing better crops for feeding the cow. And then the last part is probably the bringing the cloud into that. So today, and actually during this conference or this summit, I've seen many type of platforms that's been developed, like for finance, for other things, but the opportunities are huge, because if we want to go into developing a new industry, like there are opportunities to create platform where we can bring the farmer with the slaughterhouse with the industries, like make sure that actually the whole logistics of transportation from the farm to the slaughterhouse to the industry, there is a platform for that. We could think about other platforms basically for just creating a marketplace. Like the opportunities are huge. Like if you think about it, like there are every aspect of this transformation. It has opportunities that we can do more innovation in it. And so that's the 3 insights about how we can do things a little bit differently as well.
Rafik, thank you so much. So ecosystem, capacity building, data sciences.
And research.
And research,
yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Sidi, I'm now turning to you. So USADF actually does practical work in agriculture. And you also drive innovation in the sectors where you work. You work in Rwanda and 19 other countries around the continent. Anything you would share that's relevant to what we're discussing here?
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Honorable Minister, for having me here today. As was mentioned, I lead the U.S. African Development Foundation. We're a U.S. government agency, development actor. We work in 20-some-odd countries, and we operationalize through local expertise and local talent. So I'm proud to say here in Rwanda, we have our country partner here, Africa Development Consultants, led by Rebecca. Rebecca, please stand. And our local partner who leads all of our operations here is Jeffrey here. So as a U.S. government agency, yes, it's maybe U.S. financing, but it's local African management. And in Rwanda, it's Rwandan, and Uganda, it's Ugandan, and Malawi, it's Malawian, and Kenya is Kenyan. So that's really, really important for us. Eric, I want to share a little bit around sort of the actors as a financial institution of some sort and a government agency that implements programs. I think the actors in the space are almost as critical as sort of the elements that they're working on. We talked about a little bit about this together. And the way I look at this is sort of thinking about it from a systems approach. Whether it's a cow or whether it's crops, what systems do they operate in? And so first and foremost, we look at this from the standpoint of the market and the market players, the market demand. Really, what role do private sector actors who really are trying to procure goods or services, crops or products, what role do they play? So the market is critical to an effective agricultural ecosystem. On that side, next side is sort of looking at the suppliers. In an African context, those are smallholder farmers across the continent, 250 million. So really thinking about whether it's cow or crops, thinking about the roles that smallholder farmers have to play is critically important to being successful. And then two critical elements that bring us all here together today is really about finance and technology. And those two enablers really transform agriculture throughout the continent, because you have the market demand, you have the supply from smallholder farmers, you have the financial support that smallholder farmers need, and you have the technology really needed to transform agriculture. So those four critical components bring together the government, they bring together financial institutions, they bring together smallholder farmers, NGOs, all the different actors play a role in those four critical elements of market, of smallholder suppliers, of financial institutions, and of technology providers. I want to share a little bit around how all this comes together in a real life story. So before coming to USADF, I worked for the Rockefeller Foundation. I was based in Nairobi, Kenya. Spent 6 years there working on and leading the agricultural portfolio throughout the continent. But one of the most compelling stories that sort of brings us all together is the story of a smallholder farmer named Nancy. So Nancy is emblematic of what drives agriculture today, but also shows how with the solutions and the opportunities and innovations that we're talking about, how tomorrow's agriculture in Africa won't be the same. And I think that technology and digitization has the ability to take smallholder agriculture in Africa from a current system that's really based upon hope and prayer. It literally is based upon hope and prayer to a system that really is based around productivity and real profitability. So why do I got some funny looks? Why do I say hope and prayer? Well, here's Nancy's reality. Nancy's a smallholder farmer in Kenya. She grows potatoes. She has some seeds. She hopes that those seeds are authentic, that those seeds actually can germinate. She puts those seeds in the ground, and she hopes and prays that the soil is fertile enough that it's going to germinate those seeds. She doesn't have access to fertilizer. OCP hasn't reached her yet. So she's hoping that those seeds germinate. She's hoping and praying that it rains, because only 4% of African agriculture is under irrigation. So she's hoping and praying for the rains. She's hoping and praying that the pest and the disease don't strike her potatoes and her crops and kill all that has potentially germinated. She's hoping that if she is able to fight off the pest and disease, that her crops will improve and will create some level of a yield that she can sell. But she's hoping that she'll find somebody and praying that she finds somebody who can buy her product. And lastly, she's hoping and praying that in the midst of trying to find a buyer, that she has storage and some level of protection to really, so that her crops don't rot in her quest to find a market. And that is literally Nancy's reality. It's hope and prayer, because the information and the technology that she really needs isn't necessarily available to her. That's her everyday existence. Her whole existence is hope and prayer along the way. And technology and digitization and innovation has the ability to take Nancy's hopes and prayers to make them to more predictable production, so that she can really be on a pathway to prosperity. And the work that we do at the U.S. African Development Foundation does bring real, practical, applicable solutions to Nancy. And let me give you some areas that we are working that are real life examples that take Nancy as an example of one of 250 million smallholders on the continent. So think about the standpoint of this hope and prayer for access to a market. We're looking at digital payment platforms that literally link coffee growers in Uganda to coffee suppliers in Uganda. We're supporting coffee cooperatives, helping them to be able to put their products on a digital platform that then buyers are able to go to that platform and buy and procure coffee. And we're working with private sector actors like MasterCard. And so literally helping smallholder farmers be able to say, like Nancy, that she has product to sell, and buyers who are looking for those products to be able to look at this digital marketplace and a digital platform. There's also innovations that revolve around, that we're supporting, that revolve around what does Nancy's plot size really look like? So Nancy is in a cooperative. There are 300 members. All of those members, if you ask them what their plot sizes are, they're gonna say, well, my land starts where there's a tree over there and where there's a bush over here, and then when you go around the corner where there's this big rock, and then at the last place there's a fence, and that's where my land is. Well, is that 2 hectares? Is that 5 hectares? What's the size of her plot? How does she tell somebody that? And she has 300 cooperative members who all are describing their plots in this illustrative manner. But the banks are not going to finance her yield based upon her saying that her land starts where the tree ends and where the fence begins. And so in Rwanda and in Tanzania, we are supporting smallholder cooperatives who are using drones to map their plots. Literally drones that are geospatial data that are taking information and showing smallholder farmers, maize farmers in Tanzania, maize farmers in Rwanda, giving them plot analysis so they see how much of their land is actually under cultivation, and they actually are digitizing their cooperatives, because the farmers' cooperatives of the future won't have the log books and the registries that we've all seen when we go to the farms. They will have digital information on how much land Nancy has, what she actually grows, what her yield was last year, and things like that. So that's just another innovation that we're practically doing here in Rwanda and in Tanzania. And lastly, let me just say, I mentioned technology, and we think about ICT and that kind of technology, but we're also talking about mechanization is needed. No more sort of looking at farming with the hoe. We're saying, obviously, that you need access to mechanization. But historically in agriculture, we've always sort of said, one man, one tractor, or in Africa, because most women in Africa are farmers, or most farmers in Africa are women, one woman, one tractor. Well, does Nancy and all 300 members of her cooperative, do they all need to own tractors? Do they? They all don't need to own tractors, not in this day and age. They need access to the tractor. So we are on the verge of supporting an innovative solution that literally links mechanization to smallholder farmers. It's called Hello Tractor, and it basically is the Uber of tractors starting in Nigeria. And so what this does is allows Nancy and smallholder farmers to literally order tractor services to come to their plots in their land for 1 hour. I just need you to till my land with a tractor for 1 hour, in just the same way as some of you order a taxi or a ride to come and pick you up at a certain time and drop you at a certain place. People can do that now with technology, ordering mechanization, so Nancy and all these farmers don't have to try to own a $20,000, a $40,000, a $50,000 tractor. They just need access to tractors certain times in the season and for a certain amounts of time, over that period. So we're really, a practical player in the system, and we are supporting through seed capital and technical assistance farmers and cooperatives like Nancy to really access technology, but also to transform their lives. Lastly, I'll just say this. In the agricultural space, there are linkages with agriculture that now are known, and it's kind of silly that the space hadn't, come to this conclusion before. So now it's hardly ever that you hear people talking about agriculture and food security without talking about nutritional security. But because we decoupled those things in the development community, we were funding food security projects and we were funding nutrition projects over here. But now it's together, because man does not live on calories and maize alone. You need meat, you need vegetables, you need nutrition. And so the food security and the nutrition security is linked. I want to really propose a challenge to us to think about agriculture and energy in the same way. The same way we know we need to improve our agriculture, we know those same rural ag-dependent people also need access to energy. And so we're thinking and innovating and supporting solutions that link agriculture and energy. And this is where every smallholder farmer, every agricultural initiative needs irrigation. So how are we supporting that? With solar-powered irrigation. Any kind of productive industrialized agriculture needs processing, because you need to turn that crop into something or you need to store it. And so with the processing, we're talking about solar processing, solar-powered maize mills, no longer using diesel, or if you're not connected to the grid. And lastly, we think about storage and particularly cold storage. And so how are you looking at renewable energy, off-grid energy solutions for storage? And so solar-powered cooling. And just to close, going back to the cow, in Rwanda, one of the great investments that we have is a solar-powered cooling refrigeration system that literally is being used to store dairy milk throughout the country. And this company, this small Rwandan-based innovative agricultural company that's using solar-powered cooling is now, has worked now, we gave them a $100,000 grant. And they've catalyzed their entire business. Now they are got financing, $2 million in financing, and now are using that solution in Malawi. And so some startup capital linked with some innovative technology, linked with a number of actors in the system can really transform communities and transform agriculture. So happy to share that.
CD, thank you so very, so much. I think for some of the entrepreneurs in the room, myself included, we went from hope and prayer, right, to a place of possibility. Because you gave us examples of funding that was being applied and deployed with technical assistance to reward the innovators. Why am I insisting on it? In about 8 or 9 minutes, I'm going to ask the Honorable Jean-Philippe Nsengimana, who is the special advisor at Smart Africa, to come and give us a few closing thoughts. But before I do that, I mentioned to you earlier that in July 2018, NIRDA is actually going to have a challenge fund. MIT, UM6P, I only get it wrong, I say P6, but UM6P, and OCP, and NIRDA are going to call that challenge fund to really identify innovators that are going to be supported over a year, funded, trained, and everything. In this room, are there people who, based on this panel and other thoughts you had from before, know they are going to apply to this challenge? Raise your hand. If you know you are going to apply, raise your hand. So far, 2, 3, 4, 5, a few. Please raise your hand very high. Betty, please, Tona, if you can take pictures of them. If the cameraman can, because I'm going to check personally. I'm going to come back to Rwanda and check that you applied. And if you didn't, I will find you wherever you are. And you don't want me looking for you. It's very dangerous. So please make sure that you apply, because everything we have talked about is about innovation. Innovation is about people. It's about entrepreneurs who take risks. In my opening remarks, I spoke about Google and Microsoft being valued at $720 billion, right? Honestly, if one of you can solve some of the problems that we are talking about here today, there is a potential that your business is going to be valued that much. I think the example that CD gave of a company that started with a $100,000 grant that's now raising $2 million to go to Malawi, for me, speaks to the kind of things that are possible. So I don't want to do too much of an advertisement, but I thought it was important to really mention that. Unfortunately, we started a little bit late, and the session is supposed to end at 9:30. But I'm going to give a few minutes to see if there are any burning reactions or questions from the room. It's very important, given the little time we have, that you are very short. But please, so give us your name, your company, and then make your comment.
Hi, my name is Ashutosh. I'm from India. I'm a tech entrepreneur from India and recently sold off my company. I hope I'm audible? Now it's good. Yeah. The question that I have is specific to something that you mentioned. My agriculture background is that my family in India has been in agriculture for hundreds of years. My father is an agriculture scientist and veterinarian. In India, one of the things that has been started is warehousing, e-warehousing and receipt depository, which is, I as a farmer, now one of the things that I have as a concern is cash flow. When will I get paid? At times there are places where government takes the crop, but the money comes later. So this system of warehouses connected to financial institutions to the farmers with standards set. Farmer can come to the warehouse, crop is judged according to a standard, he or she gets a receipt, it's an e-deposit, e-receipt, he goes to the financial institution and gets paid there based on the fact that the warehouse has certified it. I just thought this might be something that might be worth experimenting here. Thank you.
Great. Any other reactions? I think we will take 2 or 3 comments and then have the panel share some things. Anybody else? Yes, there is one person here. I think for entrepreneurs, people in this room are very timid. Huh? I don't know how you sell because you are supposed to be able to, yes, please.
Good morning. Yes,
If
Matthew.
You can stand up, give us your name, your company,
Sure.
and your comment.
Good morning. Matthew Pennells from Esri Global, who's a GIS software company. My point in linking the different thinkings is just to say, as we look at agriculture, the wider possibility of land management, because it all comes back down to ownership. So the agriculture initiatives need to be tied back to the ministries of land, so we don't get into the complications of whose is this. So the great work that gentleman mentioned there about drones, that needs to be rolled out to a bigger level because there's probably overlapping work in that area. So again, just linking the different initiatives back to the core thing about what land do I own and how do I claim my rights to that, therefore claim the products that I make from that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Any other reactions? Yes? Yeah, I like this one here. Okay, there is a lady here, and then there is one guy there. Please raise your hand, otherwise they won't see you. And then there is another guy after him as well. So those are going to be the last 3 comments.
Hi, my name is Sulakshana Gupta. I work with an organization called Viamo. We're a global social enterprise working in mobile for development. And I just wanted to mention this because I feel that many of you might not be aware of the work that Viamo is doing with MTN Rwanda. We've launched a toll-free public service information line. It's the 845 service available toll-free to anybody to call in, access information on various thematic areas for free in audio and on USSD. We're currently working on making climate-smart agriculture information available to farmers. We have thousands of farmers who call in every single day to access weather information, a 10-day forecast, a seasonal forecast, daily forecast, and we're hoping that this is going to help them manage their crop cycles better. But I'm saying this because, I know a lot of you in this room are looking for platforms which are available now, which are accessible, and which are easy to use. And I welcome any of you to come find me, and please speak to me. We want to work with you. We want to work with government to make sure that information is available to farmers.
Great. So information is wealth. Thank you so much for that information. Please.
Thank you. My name is Christophe Habimana, a graduate in food science and technology from University of Rwanda.
Great.
My question goes to
Betty,
me.
please take his name, because he's going to apply to the challenge, I know. And he's going to win, probably.
Thank you so much. I'm honored. My question goes to Mr. Sidi about the USAID. You have mentioned about the thing of agriculture and nutrition, and you see when you come to the farmer, these local farmers, they only see the productivity from their crops, but they don't think about nutrition because of the market. They are thinking about exporting. So, and my question is this one: how do you deal with the mindset adjustment? Let me say that we use that terminology, mindset adjustment, to understand that farmers should regulate or balance their profitability wishing with the nutrition perspective. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think there was a last comment there, and I feel really bad, but I'm going to take another last one here. But then we really, really have to make them short. Please, your name.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Yalguema Romeo Thierry. Me also, I am doing agriculture in the University of Rwanda.
Great. Are you going to apply to the challenge?
Say?
Are you going to apply to the NIDA challenge?
Okay, I will apply.
That wasn't convincing. You were doing very well, then you put okay on it. Okay, I'm joking. Please go ahead. Giving you a hard time.
My question is somehow not related to the topic, but it is also an innovation. It is a suggestion. I will address myself to Nicholas. It is about, here in Rwanda, we are facing the problem of land. It is the land shortage. And I suggest that this system of hydroponics, I think all of us know it in agriculture. Hydroponics, it uses short land, and there is no use of soil, which means we can avoid the many diseases of the crops. But unfortunately, this hydroponics, it is only for vegetables. Is not there a way that we can upgrade it from vegetables up to maybe it can hold other crops such as maize or potatoes? Thank you.
That's a very interesting idea. Very, very interesting idea. Yes. Okay, please, 15 seconds.
Okay, thank
And
you.
Roger, you will have 5 seconds. Okay, please.
Thank you. My name is Dominic. I'm a university lecturer and a researcher, at the same time an entrepreneur.
Are you going to apply to the challenge?
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah, true. Okay,
Take
good.
his picture.
Thank you very much. My specialization is climate science and geoinformation, and also we are advising farmers on how they can better use the advisory services from the whole value chain,
yes,
so that they maximize the input,
yes,
and also crop production,
yes,
and also have a way of use the knowledge acquired from different sources.
yes.
But from that experience, I would like to know from the other areas where different projects that are integrative, how can we learn from a model that is integrating IoT, ICT, GIS, remote sensing, and something like drones use, so that farmers can capture that package and then apply it in their agriculture activities?
That's
because
a
we
very
are
good
facing
idea.
that challenges.
So basically a one-stop shop for all technologies related
That's
to agriculture.
definitely, yes, because
Perfect.
each and every
We
thing
heard
is
you.
integrated each
Great.
other.
Your 15 seconds is over.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
5 seconds.
My name is Roger. I just want to make a comment or a suggestion. Moving from cow to cow 2.0 came to resolve an issue of jobs creation for the youth. We have been used to have people supported by the mama going to the farms, selling tomato on market every day for years and years. But now if you are moving from 2.0 with innovations, youth have no more excuses. That's why they need to be informed and this
Yes.
new gospel propagated.
No, I love your comment because you remember blaming the car I talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
If we come out of this room and we don't do it, we should blame ourselves. We shouldn't find anybody else in the chain to blame. We should blame ourselves. So you said it very well. Thank you. So we're going to give 0.5 seconds to each member of the panel to say one last word, and then ask the special advisor to take a few minutes, because he's our host, so I can give him a few minutes to bring it all together, and then we will go to the next sessions. Please, Gillian.
I guess the last thing I would remind you all is I think this is a space that has been wildly underinvested in, so the opportunities are huge. So I would encourage you all to apply to the challenge and any other sources of funding if you have an idea, because the more use cases we have out there, the more chance we have of something very scalable and real happening in this agricultural sector.
Thank you, Gillian.
My comment is really just around collaboration. I think from the comments that were raised around land, around information sharing via mobile, warehouse receipt systems, e-warehouse receipt systems, it just says that an integrated approach when we look at agriculture is so vital and so necessary. So just encouraging us all to share and to collaborate more.
Thank you, CD. Luis?
So yeah, I think from what everyone is saying is just really understanding that agriculture is one of those sectors that has so many spillover effects and so many the integration that CD is talking about. Quick example is when we were looking at one of our the space in agriculture and one of our champions in the sector, realizing that if you have a lot of wastage along the chain, for instance, looking at maize, that is going to have an impact not only on the maize sector, but also in the animal feeds sector, in poultry, in beef, because if you're wasting, the costs go up. So we realize that 75% of the cost of animal feeds was coming from these wastages along the value chain. And so you might be looking at agriculture in its isolated space and not understanding how it's affecting all these other industries and making them uncompetitive. But also just to encourage, our agro entrepreneurs and innovators who are here, as CD said, and listening to what Rafik also said, I think you're in a country where really, you're going to for sure move from just hope and prayer to actual, to actual things happening. NIRDA has very exciting, plans in the pipeline, looking at narrowing down on priority value chains and seeing how they can help you who are in those spaces to acquire the technology that you need to enhance value in that space, helping you with the capacity building that Rafik was talking about, both in terms of how do you use the technology, how do you come up with the business plans that are going to help you get financing, but also how are you going to commercialize, with the innovations that you have through patents, through, all these forms of IP. So looking at the entire process that you need to go to so that you're not just living, on a prayer, but they're actually supporting you along this way. And an RDB that's also looking to bring in private sector responses, both from international organizations, but from investors that are looking specifically to address issues along the agricultural value chain.
Thank you, Louise. Rafik?
So for my 5 seconds, just hoping that actually there's going to be more people that will apply than the hands that I saw, even if it's encouraging. Actually, the thing is that usually the most simple ideas are the ones that are going to be probably the most successful, because their simplicity means that they're addressing some real issues in a simple way that can be replicated, that can be scaled and everything. So whatever ideas you have, just take that and see, is it really solving a real problem? And if it is, then apply and bring your idea so that actually we can make the project more of a success.
Thank you so much, Rafik. Honorable Phil, please.
Thank you, Eric, for asking me to speak last, because you left me with the easiest job, which is to say thank you so much, very much. Because I just want to thank all the participants this morning. Honorable Minister, thank you so much for coming and open this for us and stay up to the end. I thank the UMP6 OCP and the Bank Foundation for co-sponsoring this. When Franny came to my office, I was as intrigued as every one of you about this whole concept, this whole idea of the cow in the car. After 30 minutes presentation and conversation, I say, I still don't understand it. But I'm so intrigued that I'm happy to co-sponsor this. So we each put 50% of what was necessary to have this session running. And I'm so happy that it's been so engaging. I'm not disappointed at all. I want to thank the panelists, moderator, my friend Eric, Julian, CD Glynn, that I'm happy to meet today, Louise and Rafik for bringing your intellectual horsepower to drive this conversation. The people at NIRDA, Betty, Linda, and others for all the efforts to put together this program this morning. We talked about the cow and the car and the crops and the technology. We talked about the ecosystems, value chains, the potential and the power of this value chain to drive economic growth. There is an aspect that I'm happy no one talked about, because that's what I want to talk about. It's my favorite, is the cow and the culture. The cow is really very centric to our culture. You need a cow to get a bride. You need a bride to get a wife. You need a wife to get kids. And you need milk to feed the kids. And I wonder whether anyone has thought about the relationship between this whole technology and that milk that you use to feed the kids. So a few months ago, the president of the World Bank was visiting. He visited Muhanga. He saw all these drones carrying blood to remote health centers and hospitals. and his mind wouldn't shift for a second about nutrition. He said, for Rwanda to sustain this type of cutting-edge innovation, for this to spread across the continent, you need an innovative generation. And he said, there is no way in 1,000,000 years that you can have an innovative generation that hasn't been properly nourished. So that was the link. And the beauty about this topic is it's just a challenge to our minds to keep thinking and innovating. And I want to close on this point, that even if CD said hope and pray is not a good strategy, I really want to go back to that bad strategy. I want to go back to that bad strategy and really pray and hope that many of the young people in this room will apply to the challenge.
They have to.
I want to hope and pray that the people who followed us on social media, I see my friends, social media activists, Safe here, sitting, and others. I really hope and pray that those who have been able to get the word out of this session are going to get even more intrigued. And I really hope and pray that we reconvene next year here, and that we'll be listening to the stories of people whose lives would have been touched by the actions that are starting today. So it is on this note of hope and prayer that I declare this session officially closed.